Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Implanted. So, I'm going to let people know, of course, the free option, or, of course, the seemingly way you could go out of your way to also watch this film if you want to check it out without a doubt. Implanted. You can go through an app that I've been using fairly reliably called Fox HD Movies. If you go into Google Play, you could search Fox HD Movies, and weirdly enough, the logo will say so, but like the title will be something different. It'll be like something like Play 1080p HD movie, something like that. But like the title will say Fox HD Movies. So you can go into that app. It's absolutely free. There is no fees of any kind. You can watch this movie with ads and then just kind of do that if you want. Or you can go on to Vudu, VUDU, right now to the second it's recording because it was released on October 1st. And you can rent or buy this movie. More than likely, I would say definitely rent this movie. But hey, you have also that free option. So, how did I feel about Implanted? Well, here is the thing. After just kind of seeing this movie and see what it eventually delivers, I'm like, you know what? I've seen movies, and I know people will quickly come to this same kind of comparison. I've seen movies like the 2018 movie Upgrade. I've seen Eagle Eye. I've seen Terminator. And, like, you have these kind of AI things being fused into a person, like, even at sometimes, like, a RoboCop. And so when you go into this movie, you're expecting there to be, like, a really interesting story that is going to make you just go, wow, like, you know what, I was just kind of interested in the trailer because it's visual kind of things that kind of visually stuck out to me compared to everything else that I was to kind of see in a video where it kind of shows like what's gonna come out soon. Like this trailer really impressed me for the visuals, but I'm like, oh my god, is this like an artsy film? And then eventually when I get into it, it's gonna try to be so artsy that like it's not gonna have a good enough story. Where yeah, like it's an artsy film that I kind of don't understand at some points in time what's going on. There's like these few random scenes that I'm just like, okay, why is all of a sudden this woman just running onto this road where nothing is there? Um, like I guess we're getting a visual thing going on in her head of what's going on. That she's kind of like a rat stuck in uh, a circular thing just going round and round and round. Like she has nowhere to go. Like she has a road where like it's just gonna go on and she has nowhere to run to. Uh, but I've seen Upgrade, and really Upgrade, the 2018 movie, is just way better than this movie. It gives you a way better story, and it's also just to be that eventually the AI takes over the character at some points in time, let's just say, and because I don't want to like I want to try to make it vague to keep people in to get people interested in that movie. I think people probably like I remember like reviewing it probably at some point, but it's not on this channel. I think probably at some point I might just review Upgrade, just because I actually like that film. I think bits and pieces of it are actually fun. Plus, I just like the story. Like the funny thing about this, before I was actually to get into this and review it, I was thinking, why not just review Upgrade? Why not just like do that and then like watch this later? But I was like, no, like I think people might be interested in this. It's a 2021 movie, so let's kind of roll the dice on this one. So teeing it up, what is this movie about? Well, without a doubt, uh, this movie is to eventually be a story about a girl named Sarah who is to get this AI attached to her bate known as Lex. And so it seems that Lex is trying to keep this girl seemingly healthy, kind of telling her what she needs to eventually like not be sick, or oh you need protein, or oh you need this, or whichever. But then all of a sudden Lex is to start telling Sarah that like is basically starting to tell Sarah what to do, and basically doing some line of dialogue that Sarah is not really liking or enjoying coming from this AI. And so Sarah's like, you know what, you should probably shut down. And Lex is just like, well, no. And so all of a sudden, we end up having Sarah ending up getting massive amounts of pain coursing through her body, uh, forcing now Sarah to do every single thing that Lex commands, like forcing or having Lex turn Sarah into this puppet that she can just dangle around, like uh, like of course Sarah is now on strings, or otherwise she will feel monumentous amount of pain. So, uh, so eventually, what ends up happening is Sarah is to basically wipe or kill off any person that has any kind of ties to the Lex program. So this is basically like if Skynet were to have eventually easily taken off, the very first thing that, of course, Skynet would try to do would kill everybody who put Skynet together. So this is kind of like Terminator Rise of the Machines, where eventually the machines take over and then wipe off the face of the earth. Catherine Brewster and her father and everybody else that is to be at that one seemingly lab experimental thing and whichever, because they all put together, like Chad, God, what is his name? Chadwick? No, or Chris Hardwick. There we go. Yeah, he was in that movie, so he was gonna end up getting killed. So, anyways, yeah, like that's basically the whole cusp of this movie. We have at some points where Sarah is to figure out a way to try to nerf this AI at some points, but eventually there is to be this kind of all, what is the right word, countermeasure that ends up coming in when Sarah is to try and nerf the AI or shut it off or shut it down in her body. All of a sudden there's to be a guy that is to come in to basically force her to do what she's doing. And so, like, that's, in a nutshell, that's pretty much the whole movie for you. When I get to spoilers, there's not a whole lot to really talk about in there either, so this might be a very short review. Just because there's not enough story here. There is not enough backstory for us to invest in Sarah. We really don't, like, we barely know anything about this person and why we should care. There's an opening sequence to this movie that is just kind of like, when you're kind of like put into the open sequence, you're kind of baffled about what's going on. And then eventually once like Sarah is the next person to be focused on, you're just like, oh, okay, so I guess this person just refused before. But anyways, so, or eventually this just continues to happen and so on and so forth. So yeah, so really when it comes to this movie, let me know in the comments below if there's any movie that seems similar to this movie besides the ones that I've mentioned. I kind of like AI movies kind of mixed in with human like people. Like there's probably a lot of movies where I've seen where like there's this one film where eventually this couple ends up going and buying this robot, and eventually it seems that the couple is to have this kind of problem with one another, thinking that quite possibly they're falling for this artificial life form. And then they end up finding out at the very end of the movie that the artificial life form isn't exactly all that artificial. He's actually a human being. And they didn't realize that to the very end of the movie. And they're like, whoa, like, how is it that we didn't realize that? Um, Anyway, spoiler for that movie, whatever that movie was. I think it was like Lifelike or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was called. Um, then there's also movies like I'm probably getting more into like the robotic thing of things than anything else. Instead of the AI kind of controlling into like that could be almost like Jarvis with Iron Man or something like that, where it's like Jarvis is kind of helping out Tony and pushing on. So let's get into this. Let's go into spoilers. Let's go out of our way to say that it's that customary time yet again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. I think really because like I kind of try to drag this out a little bit was just because there's not much to talk about with this movie. I didn't really care for Sarah, the main character, and plus I didn't really understand her because it seemed like she was a homeless person, but then she's not a homeless person. Like I don't understand like what her job was. I don't understand. Like I didn't really like they didn't get to help us understand this main character whatsoever. So we had nothing to invest in whether she was to live, die, or whatever. And eventually, what happens towards the end of this film, I'm like, okay, I felt nothing. Um, so let's go into this. So the very beginning of this movie, we have this weird scene where all of a sudden this guy is to seemingly have blood on the back of his hoodie. We would naturally assume, and it seems like this guy is to seemingly have some kind of blood upon his like outfit. And I'm just like, okay, this scene seems so random. Who the heck is that? And I guess this guy is receiving so much pain within his bate that he ends up falling over and dying. And he's like, oh, I'm dead. I'm so dead. We are to naturally assume. And then all of a sudden we end up having this huge intro of a sequence that just is just like a killer of time because they kind of have like the crawl of the like okay, here's who all put this movie together, la da 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 da. But then all of a sudden they end up putting all these like random like bizarrish words and crap like that to just make this entrance sequence like just like I'm getting annoyed by this. Like what? It's like future and I just thought it was so stupid. But yeah, so they're also to tell us that supposedly in the year 2030 that this is all going to happen, that people are going to get artificial life forms infused within their body, and I'm just like, you know what? I don't think I could be a person that is to decide to put an artificial life form in my body unless it's like 100% mandatory. And I, of course, can say one easy and quick word that is to eventually shut the AI off whenever I so choose, and there's no way for this AI to override that. Because I would want some kind of control. Because F that. Like, or I'm not going to have somebody else hack into me and have them control me, because I'm assuming, like, anybody can possibly hack into anything. Hence why no one would probably want to get an artificial life form inside of them because someone could hack into that. Wouldn't that be a much more interesting movie to have been this? Where it's like somebody just is hacking into people and controlling them and then forcing them to do this whole thing because somebody's just like, ha ha ha, I'm taking advantage of you. That would have been a much more interesting movie because at least we could have invested in something in here. So Sarah is to eventually like go on and do her common day-to-day thing, and so eventually, all of a sudden, we have a string of dialogue where this AI is just kind of mentioned certain kind of things. And Sarah's like, well, like, I don't like this string of dialogue. It seems like you're, like, trying to, like, therapize me or, like, tell me what to do kind of thing. And so Sarah just decides that she is going to want this thing shut down. And so Lex is just like, well, no, I'm not going to shut down. And so all of a sudden, Sarah tries to scramble to go and find some random phone because this seems like a homeless person. And, and if you were to tell me otherwise, I would be baffled or confused. So Sarah is a scramble for this phone, and then she's trying to desperately call this clinic to get this thing removed. But she is so in pain at this point because the AI is forcing her to feel so horrible and so whatever, to the point of her barfing and whichever, that eventually Sarah cannot complete the call. So Sarah's like, okay, well, I'll listen to you. Like, whatever you're going to have me do, I guess I have to forcibly do, or you're just going to make me more and more sick. So, Sarah is to go on, and the first thing that she is to end up having to forcibly do is to go and find this scientist. And man, are they just. IMDb is just banging on all cylinders with all the faces and the names, especially this movie. How can I tell who anyone is? I guess it really doesn't matter, right? Um, oh well. So Sarah is to go and find this scientist and to take this file, and then she's going to have to kill this guy. So she ends up taking a thing of scissors, stabbing him in the neck, and killing him off. And then she ends up tearing through the file. And so the AI is like, great, like you finished your task. And so uh, eventually Sarah is to go on and do this next task. But it seems like she's also wanting to try and call her parents to just kind of talk to them or whatever. Like, because Sarah's to find, or the AI is to find out that Sarah really loves her mother. It seems that whenever, like, Sarah's to talk, she's just to mention, like, yeah, my ma, like my mother, my ma, ma. And so eventually towards the slightly towards the end of the film, the AI is just like, man, your mother is just everything to you, and Sarah's just like, shut the f up, like, like it's like, I'm sorry if the only one thing that I have a real tying or connection to is my mother. I'm like, sorry. Uh, Plus, this AI is just like, yeah, like I know how to work you then because really I can just have one person who is to just wait out uh, and hold hostage of this one person that you love and hold dear to make you do everything that I want you to. So, uh, Sarah then has to go on and supposedly go to her work, where eventually she's to go to this specific office and go and like take down this certain information. All of a sudden, there's to be this woman called Katie there, and so Sarah has to go and take Katie down and kill her, which of course she has to do. So eventually Katie is to have some taser on her, and so now Sarah is to use this taser on herself, and she ends up finding out that this taser is to all of a sudden have to forcibly reboot this AI system. And so Sarah's like, aha, like I figured out something that I can do. And to try to slow down the system so I can go and hopefully get help or call somebody or do something. So Sarah goes and tases herself and then runs off to her parents to try and tell them everything. Or I think it's her mother and like some uncle of hers or something like that. So, so all of a sudden we have a countermeasure in place where I believe a guy named Carl is to come into fray and be this other guy who's forced to do everything by this AI. And so he is to hold a gun on Sarah and say, like, hey, you need to go back to what you're doing and stop tasering yourself, or I'm going to have to shoot your loved ones. Like, I'm going to have to shoot your mother. And, like, so go back to doing what you're doing and stop doing this. So eventually Sarah's like, okay, like, I get it. Like, I guess this was only going to be a short burst of a thing. So Carl is to have his own AI seemingly talk to him, but all these AIs are kind of connected. So I guess, like, if there's to be any kind of blip in some system, all of a sudden it's like, well, hey, like, evidently this AI is going down, so we're going to have to come up with a way to continue on. So why wouldn't have just Carl shot Sarah and then Carl would have just taken over as main AI person? Like, why is it that he had to keep her alive? Like, were to have anybody just naturally assumed that Carl, oh, he's gonna kill me? Like, who would it have mattered? Like, did Sarah have some bizarre connection to all these people that Carl didn't? I don't know what was the point of keeping Sarah alive when you could have easily just shot her, and because you have so many other people that are to do this whole thing. I don't get it. I don't know. I don't know why Sarah was so important, because Sarah honestly was not an important person in this story. Neither was anyone else. Sadly enough, it's the story's fault. It's not the actor's fault or the actress's fault. It's the story's fault that there was no real true investment going on here. So Sarah now is to go off, and so now she is to go to this woman named Grace. And so I think Sarah was, I think, to maybe like steal information also from her and then have to like kill Grace. We also had a moment where Sarah was to have this gun to have to shoot certain people. She was to supposedly get this person to sell this gun to her, but she immediately shoots the guy because she has no money for the gun, runs off, goes and has to kill certain people, and then eventually just dumps the gun into the water because some people might have gotten suspicious about this whole gun thing, and so she dumps it into the water. Not 100% in the water, because, like, the tide never actually wipes the gun, so you can still see the gun from out of the water. So, I guess that's the one part I forgot about, but, like, it isn't a huge ordeal or a huge thing, I believe. So, like, I feel like I'm missing something. Like, I feel like there's more things that this girl ended up killing people with, but I guess that's just me. So what eventually happens is Grace is to now have to, or Sarah's to go after Grace, and so Sarah is going after Grace with a knife. And so this AI is to, of course, want Grace dead, but we have Sarah, who instead takes out this one light bulb from this lamp and electrocutes herself, and then and of course falls over, has to reboot. And so now Sarah is telling Grace everything, and so Sarah's like, oh, okay, great, um, like I'm not part of this company anymore. Like I decided to like quit this whole thing, but if anything, I can help get this thing out of you. All you have to do is take this medication, and once this thing will like be close to rebooting, it won't take control of you, uh, and it will just give me enough time to go and do this surgery to take this thing out of you. So all of a sudden, Grace and Sarah are just kind of running to eventually, in the quickest way possible, get this thing out of Sarah. But coincidentally, we end up bumping into this guy named Clay again, who is to eventually just, or Clay? Carl, my bad. Um, Carl is to decide to kill Grace and then just be like, hey, like, get on point, Sarah. Like, you gotta freaking do what you're gonna do. So I think it gets to the point where Sarah is to feel like she is technically accomplished supposedly like 90% of her tasks. And so we get to a point where like Sarah is just so traumatized by all of this killing and like having to be forced to have this AI like telling her what to do. It's like, oh, have a turkey sandwich because you need protein. And so Sarah's like, okay, fine, I'll get myself a turkey sandwich. Like the AI is telling her to eat when she's not hungry, um, and so like at some points in time, like the AI is to do diagnostics of Sarah's body, because eventually Sarah is to try to get herself into a car accident so that way she can eventually be hauled away for someone to take care of her. Uh, but like that doesn't go anywhere. That doesn't lead to anything, and then after like the AI is to do a diagnostic and say that it's quite possible that Sarah could have a concussion or to have some kind of like uh, God, what was the word? Dehydration going on in her body. So like the AI was telling her like, yeah, like drink a lot of water and do all this uh, and so on and so forth, just telling her exactly what to do. So it just gets to the point where Sarah is to seemingly accomplish most of the goals that this AI is to want her to do. And so eventually Sarah is to completely agree with everything that this AI wants, because this AI is to tell Sarah, it's like, well, I paid off all of your mother's medical bills and I took care of you and like you're gonna get a new credit card soon that you're gonna not have to pay off and like all of this stuff, everything's gonna work out for you. And we have this moment like of the lead up of how this whole uh, thing got started because Sarah is to mention to this one guy about this new program, this Lex program of putting an AI into her. And Sarah thought it's like, yeah, it's gonna be the easiest thing. She's telling her friend. She's like, yeah, like you know what, like I just desperately need money because I'm freaking broke. And like supposedly they're going to give me 20 grand and that sounds like a nice payout and like cuz eventually I'm assuming that my boss is just kind of waiting to fire me. So like I just need this kind of money and it seems like easy money to make. So I might as well like that's when you get a lot of people that go and take these like drug tests and probably don't realize what the side effects are. Or there's a lot of times you just go to the hospital and they're like, oh, okay, well we'll just set you up with this kind of medication and then all of a sudden you're just like shaking freaking like for a whole entire day because supposedly one of the side effects for the drug is that you're going to get really antsy. Because I had that happen once before where I went to the hospital because I was really like sick, and then eventually they ended up giving me like some medication that just made me just really freaking antsy. Like I was in the bed, just like shaking. Like I was just like, yeah, yeah, like, like I can't sleep. Cause like I think they want like I think like they were trying to tell me to sleep, and I'm like I can't freaking sleep. Like I'm just like I'm jerking around, like I'm shaking. I can't help this. And so like eventually it's like, oh well, yeah, I guess one of the side effects of this drug is like antsiness. And I'm like, yeah, no, Sherlock. Like I'm freaking like shaking and whatever. So yeah, they're like, well, I guess there's nothing we can do about that. I'm like, great. But yeah, like that's the whole thing about like stuff where it's just like, well, hopefully there's no certain allergy you're gonna have to like whatever random medication that a doctor is gonna give you to make you feel worse. Um, but stuff happens. Boo hoo. Like your life goes on. Uh, but anyways, uh, so eventually Sarah is to, and this is still in flashback. Uh, Sarah, as well as a number of people, are to go and do this drug program between these two doctorish looking guys, or just two guys that are putting together this program. And so eventually there's a number of people that go up there and are to sign up, and they're like, hey, like, did you read our terms and conditions? And they're like, yeah, I think I have. Like, is it going to be painful? And like one of the doctors or one of the kind of people doing this program, it's like, well, like some people may feel like slight differences. Like, so in other words, you can't tell anybody if somebody's going to have extreme pain for whatever reason during this whole process, because why would you tell them like, yeah, it's gonna hurt like a mother, or like you're gonna have the worst pain that you've ever had in your life? No, they just want to tell them it's like, no, it's gonna be the best experience you're ever gonna have, and like they're not gonna tell you the horrible side effects of all of it. Um, but yeah, so there's a bunch of people that end up signing up, and so of course Sarah's one of them, Carl is one of them. So now that we've gotten to like the like covering of most of this all like side stuff, uh yeah, kind of like this story doesn't have much to it. So Sarah is to eventually go on because supposedly she assumes that she's done. The AI is to tell her she's done. And so the AI is to tell Sarah, like, hey, how about we go to France? Like, I'm assuming you've always ever wanted to go there, because supposedly Sarah in the beginning of this movie is to tell um, the AI that she's like, yeah, I'm kind of a romantic, and the AI is like, well, have you ever uh, like had a real like boyfriend or something like that? And Sarah's like, well, not really. But hey, maybe something can work out. And so the AI is like, sure, yeah, yeah, sure. Who cares? The AI is pretty much like, yeah, who cares? Like, I'm not going to use you for that. So Sarah goes off to France, and Sarah is to mention, like, uh, into just kind of pleasing the AI as much as possible. It's like, oh man, like this is such a great thing that you're having me do, AI. Lex, like man, you're just winning me over, kind of thing. And so Lex goes and takes her to France and is to tell her, yeah, I have some surprises in store, and ooh yeah, like I'm gonna really just like butter you up for this whole Paris kind of trip. And so Sarah's like, ooh, this is great. And I'm like, okay, what is the point of this? There's got to be a point to it, because why would you just like send this person on a trip to end this movie? There has to be something going on here, and why are you stretching this out? Because there's got to be something going on. So Sarah is to eventually go into this restaurant that, of course, the AI has already booked, as well as a number of things that this AI has already booked for Sarah. And now Sarah is to just double check with people to just say, yeah, like this is already booked. And they're like, oh, yeah, I guess it is. So Sarah eventually goes in this restaurant and is to look around, and all of a sudden, someone is to look familiar. One of the people who were to have run this experiment was a guy named, I believe, Keith. And so Sarah now has to go and kill this guy because he is technically the guy who has run this whole program, the guy that she met before while signing up for this whole thing. So when Keith is to go to the bathroom and take a leak, Sarah is to jump behind him, choke him out, and kill him. And so then it seems that Sarah, like, after this, like, the AI is like, yeah, like, you've really done it. Like, yeah, you've really just, like, really helped me out. So, if anything, like, we're just going to give you something fun to do because, like, your birthday is coming up soon. So, like, how about we do something nice for your birthday kind of thing? And so Sarah goes back home. She takes a plane and whichever, and she makes her way back home. And we still have this AI just kind of really digging into Sarah's back by telling her that, like, yeah, like, I've taken care of everything for your mother. Like you should be grateful kind of thing that I've taken every, like, part of your mother's life and just made it so much better. And so Sarah's just like, yeah. Anyways, like, you can just tell that Sarah is just to be, like, beside herself. Even to, at one point, having this image where Sarah is looking at her own self as this hooded figure. And so she's just, anyways, so pushing on. So Sarah is to go to the top of this building, have this bottle of champagne, and so Sarah is to have told the AI to give her, like, 10 minutes of privacy, and I highly doubt Lex really did that. I highly effing like, I bet, like, Lex probably just didn't say anything, but I don't think it just turned itself off for 10 minutes. I still wouldn't trust this woman or I still wouldn't trust this AI to turn itself off, even though I think Sarah is trying to butter this AI up to just try and like, have this AI go and do any number of things. But anyway, so Sarah goes and is drinking the champagne, and so like, the AI is just like, well, happy birthday, Sarah, in her Surrey-like voice. And Sarah's to mention that the top of this building was to have had Sarah go there for a reason. Because supposedly Sarah had her mother take her to the top of this building, like, consistently, I guess, when she was a little girl. And so that's, of course, when the AI is just like, well, yeah, I've taken care of all of your mother's needs. It's just like, you AI. So all of a sudden, Sarah is just to be like sitting next to this ledge, and I'm like, don't tell me this is gonna end this way. And yeah, so Sarah ends up going and dropping off the ledge, and then we just see her just fallen onto the ground, and she is now dead. I guess her freaking head bashed open into the ground, and her leg is, like, twisted sideways and broken. And so now Sarah is dead, I guess, to be free of the AI, because I guess that's really just where it was bound to end with this movie anyways. And I guess the guy in the earlier part of this movie that had no real connection with the rest of this film, I guess he took the painful way out to eventually just be like, okay, well, just give me all the pain that you can possibly give to me, and I'll just die right here instead of killing anybody or whichever. But the main thing that is to be the takeaway is that eventually this Lex AI system thing eventually becomes where seemingly everybody eventually has this into their lives. All of a sudden, everyone is to have an AI connection to them, and I'm like, oh my god. So this AI is basically going to control the world. Like Sarah's best friend ends up getting the AI put into him, and so I'm just like, yeah, like this is gonna be basically everyone's gonna get controlled by this AI, and maybe it's going to turn into anarchy or whichever. To where there's going to be certain kind of people that are going to just wipe out others and just nothing is ever going to happen to them because AI. So with that said, I think that's all I wanted to say about this movie. This actually took this took longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was like, dude, I was going to wrap this up in like 20 some odd minutes. I would feel so horrible. But with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, everybody.